For years I hated reading Socrates. I mean, in Plato's Apology, Socrates is on trial for his life. Yet he speaks as though death were merely another proposition to examine. In the Crito, his family will lose him, his children will grow up without a father, and still Socrates proceeds as if the situation can be solved through a sequence of perfectly ordered questions. Would escaping violate the laws of Athens? Is it ever right to answer injustice with injustice? And finally, does living well matter more than merely staying alive? His arguments are clearly elegant. They are also quite maddening. Many times while reading, I felt like I wanted someone to grab him by the shoulders and remind him that he was a human being. Your friend is begging you to live. Your children need you. The city has condemned you unjustly. You're about to drink poison. Surely this is not the moment to behave as if human life were a geometry problem. That was how Socrates appeared to me. A man attempting to reason his way out of being flesh and blood. My frustration, after all, wasn't really with logic itself. It was with the apparent completeness of Socrates' logic. He seemed to treat rational argument not as one of the capacities among others in human beings, but as the supreme court before which every other part of life had to plead its case.
Nevertheless, I will not beg you to acquit me by bringing them here. Why do I do none of these things? Not through arrogance, gentlemen, nor through lack of respect for you. With regard to my reputation and yours and that of the whole city, it does not seem right to me to do these things, especially at my age and with my reputation.
Socrates would rather die than contradict the principles he had defended throughout his life. There is something quite magnificent about that, absolutely. But there's also something frightening. Most of us do not live in such a purified moral universe. We make decisions from inside a web of relationships, obligations, instincts, and compromises. What I'm saying here is that human beings are not syllogisms. A philosophy that ignores this can begin to feel less like wisdom than evasion. It can seem as though the philosopher has eliminated the messiness of life, simply by refusing to admit the mess into the argument. And for a long time, that was my verdict on Socrates. His rationalism seemed psychologically impossible, and most importantly, ethically incomplete, unsustainable. Then, on a recent rereading, something clicked. My biggest mistake had been reading Socrates as though he were supposed to contain the whole of philosophy. I expected him to provide not only a defense of reason, but also a mature account of emotion, of friendship, politics, family, tragedy, and ordinary human weakness. I judged him for failing to reconcile principles that later thinkers would spend centuries trying to reconcile. So Socrates was an extreme beginning. He wasn't the first Greek thinker to use reason, nor did rational inquiry spring fully formed from his mind. But in Plato's portrayal, Socrates became one of history's most uncompromising embodiments of the examined life. He pushed a single question with almost unbearable intensity. What happens when a person refuses to accept an idea merely because it is familiar, popular, or emotionally comforting? To establish the authority of rational examination, Socrates had to take it further than any balanced person would. He had to become reason's extremist. That extremity was not a defect in the project. I reckon it was the project. New ideas are rarely introduced in their final, moderate form. The pioneer cannot always be the synthesizer, right? His task was to make reason impossible to ignore. To do that, he had to demonstrate that inherited customs could be questioned, that reputation was not the same thing as goodness, and that confidence was not the same as knowledge. That a person could be surrounded by authority, tradition, and public opinion and still ask, but is it true? Socrates therefore makes himself the test case. He argues that principles should survive pressure. Then he places them under the greatest pressure imaginable: humiliation, imprisonment, and finally death.
I would much rather die after this kind of defense than live after making the other kind. Neither I nor any other man should, on trial or in war, contrive to avoid death at any cost. It is not difficult to avoid death, gentlemen. It is much more difficult to avoid wickedness, for it runs faster than death.
I think this is why his reasoning feels so severe. He is showing us what rational integrity looks like when stripped of every escape route. Very few of us could live like that. Very few of us should, I think. But that does not make Socrates useless. Instead, I think it makes him foundational. And so does the history of Western philosophy. Later thinkers could work with a more complicated picture of human life because the authority of rational inquiry had already been established. Aristotle, for example, gives us a world that feels more recognizably inhabited by human beings. He talks about how virtue is developed through habit, judgment, and participation in a community. He talks about how a good life includes friendship, emotion, character, and practical wisdom. And moral action depends not only on knowing abstract principles, but on perceiving what a particular situation demands. That makes Aristotle's own image for moral correction feel almost like a quiet explanation of what Socrates had made possible. Near the end of Book 2, after describing virtue as a mean in the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle admits that the way back to the mean sometimes passes through the opposite extreme.
And we must drag ourselves away from it toward its contrary. For by leading ourselves far from error, we will arrive at the middle term, which is in fact what those who straighten warped lumber do.
Aristotle is speaking about the formation of character. But I think the shape is larger than that. A warped soul is not straightened by remaining where it already bends. It has to be pulled hard in the other direction. It seemed like Socrates had done this for philosophy itself. Athens had bent toward custom, reputation, and inherited opinion, so he pulled thought towards reason with an almost inhuman force. Only after that correction could Aristotle describe a more inhabited middle. Before reason could be integrated with emotion, tradition, and practical life, its independence had to be asserted. And so Socrates drew the boundary by running to its furthest edge. I still do not believe that every human problem can be solved through argument. I still think the Credo leaves essential things outside the room. The claims of friendship, the responsibilities of fatherhood, the emotional reality of injustice, and the possibility that loyalty to law can become complicity with a broken system. But Socrates was establishing the right to question the words we had inherited. We don't have to become pure creatures of reason to recognize what we owe to the rational spirit he embodied. The refusal to confuse convention with truth, popularity with justice, or certainty with knowledge. For years, I asked Socrates to be fully human. Now I see that his role may have required him to become something narrower, carrying one essential human capacity: to an inhuman extreme. I don't want to live exactly as Socrates lived, but I am finally grateful that someone did. Thank you for watching. See you next time.